great guest presenters. Thank you. Got 3 guest presenters today from Adobe. We've got Hugo, Rob, and Alistair. They're going to be talking us through some of their new products, which can help with improving the accessibility of PDFs, and also have a chat as well about some of their other new products, including Express, Adobe Express. You can see this isn't my, this is very much their show today. And one thing I want folks to remember as well is that, you know, this is, as Edward was just mentioning, it's very, we like to have our clinics to be really interactive. So if you've got questions, please do use the chat or raise your hand. So it's a really good opportunity as well to engage with, you know, the source, like the people actually at Adobe, rather than have, you know, someone else like me sort of talk it through. So I'm going to stop rambling now, and I'm going to hand over to Rob, Hugo, and Alistair. I think, Hugo, you're going to be leading today, I believe. So
yeah, I believe I can,
if you've got things you'd like to show us, and I'll let you introduce yourselves as well, because you know your job and what you do better than I do. So over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Give me 1 second so I share the correct screen.
And while you're doing that as well, just to let people know in the chat as well, just our participants, if you could just let us know where you're from as well, and like introduce yourself. It's really helpful for the others, but also from our perspective at JISC as well. It means we can capture or recognise the reach that our clinics have as well, and make sure that everybody's getting along to these. So please do use the chat to say where you're from and say hello. Oh, and Laura's put a little reminder. Okay, Hugo, over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're here to discuss PDF accessibility more specifically. Quickly, I'm going to go over why accessibility matters, though my understanding is that with this crowd, there's not so much to convince anybody of here. But then I'll dig a bit more into why tagging matters for PDF specifically. I give a couple of examples of full end-to-end automation solutions that we have, and then we'll finish with an example of the Inside Adobe, which is a new project that we just completed here at Adobe. But I guess before I jump into all of these topics, let's just give a quick intro. So yeah, hi, my name is Hugo. I'm a product manager at Adobe on the wider team that we call AI and Innovation, which is part on Document Cloud. So we work on a lot of the technology that powers Document Cloud, so everything that has to do with PDF, basically. More specifically, I'm on the services team. So we build APIs that help companies, organizations to process a lot of PDF all at once. And one of the projects that I've been working on is accessibility, which is why we're here. And in this case, it covers a little bit more than just the API. It's really all about the auto tagging technology that has been developed, and more recently, our checker. And yeah, and I have my colleague Rob, who's way more knowledgeable in accessibility than I am. So do you want to quickly introduce yourself, Rob?
Sure. I think a lot of the folks here already know me, but my name is Rob Haverty. I'm on our corporate accessibility team and focus on our document cloud products like Acrobat and all things PDF accessibility, which is why Hugo and I partner so very closely. And I will just add this Autotag API for PDF is, in my view, magical. And what Hugo has to present, I think you will find will make your lives a whole lot easier. Alistair, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Alistair Black, and I work in the UK, as you can probably tell. So I'm what they call a customer success manager, and I work with UK education customers. And you know, I think accessibility is really, I want to make it the core of what we do at Adobe. And you know, we've got a lot of new products coming out as well, which I'll be talking about a little bit later on. But yeah, I think this is going to be a great session today, and you definitely have the right people who know everything there is to know about this subject in Rob and Hugo.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's jump right in. So just very broad, you know, why accessibility matters. Again, I don't think we need to convince anybody who's watching this video or is attending right now, but there's quite a lot of people in the world who have some kind of disability. And of course, it really matters. We want to make sure we provide them with the best product, the best experience, regardless of what's their particular needs. In our case, of course, because we're here to talk about PDF, we're going to discuss more what relates to screen readers, so people that have disability that are more in terms of blindness, low vision, dyslexia, that kind of things. So now jumping into more specifically, what does it mean for a PDF to be not accessible? The analogy that I always like to use is what we see on the screen here. For those of you who can actually take a look at my screen, on the left side, we have a PDF which we would consider to be accessible. It has all of its formatting. We have a title, which is clearly identified. It has larger font. Then just under, we have a subtitle, which is in italic. We have a paragraph. We have an image, and it has like a graphic description on it. And we can have a lot of different information like that, which is available only visually. While we have on the right side is PDF. It's basically what represents a PDF that is not accessible. In this case, all of the formatting is lost. The only thing that's left behind is text. So you can imagine that what we have on the right side would be much, much more difficult for someone who can see, right? It would be much more difficult to consume the PDF that is on the right versus the one which is on the left. And that's an analogy for what it means when the PDF is not accessible at all. The one on the right basically represents what it means if I strip away all of the tags that are part of the PDF that we see on the left. So someone using a screen reader, when they have the PDF read out aloud to them, they wouldn't get any of that rich content. So they would not have any of the formatting. They would not be able to jump quickly between different points. If there were a table in that file, they would not be able to get any of the information regarding the rows and columns. So it would be just a mess, basically. And that's not even the worst case, because we see an image, for example. So images need to have some alt text that's going to read out loud what the content of the image is. So when there is an image and there is no alt text, the user that's using a screen reader will not get any information at all. So imagine if the entire page were to be an image. So if it's a scanned document, for example, then there would be no text at all. The user would not get anything at all. So that's why the first step when we get a scan document is always to do what we call an OCR, to recognize the characters, to do that first step of processing, and then add all of the tags. And it's actually something that our Autotag is able to do, and that's what I'm going to explain in a bit more detail on the next slides. So yeah, so here, that's why I mentioned that basically tags are what makes, PDF mostly accessible. Or I should say basically that this is the biggest part of making a PDF accessible. There's a lot of other items. I'm actually going to touch upon that a little bit later when I discuss the checker. But tags are what makes the biggest difference in terms of making a PDF accessible. And it also happens to be what is the most difficult, because we need basically the person who's the owner of the document and wants to make it accessible as to add a lot of all of these different boxes that are around the elements to basically provide a structure of the document. If any of you is familiar with HTML, it's very similar. It's all about having tags around the different elements. So if I'm using the same example as what we saw on the last screen, you can see that each of like the little pieces of text on the page need to have a box around them and needs to have a specific tag that can then let the screen reader tell the user out loud what's available in that document. And again, this is where if we talk about things like, actually the next slide has a bit more details. Yeah. If we think about the type of construct that this can mean, there are things like title, heading, tables, paragraph, the reading order. So that's the order in which the tags are presented. All of that really matters, but all of that also takes a lot of time to do by hand. So that's why we have our Autotag solution that has been developed over the last few years. If some of you might be familiar actually with the fact that there was an Autotag in Acrobat, I think it's been there for maybe 20 years, but we have a much more powerful version that has been developed. It's using some machine learning techniques, so it's not like a very deterministic solution. It's something which is a little bit smarter, that's able to go beyond just what a machine can normally do. And that yields like incredible results. So that's why it's able to correctly identify a lot of these elements that are found in a document. And to give a bit more detail about one that I'm fascinated by, because I happen to have worked on it from before I was working in accessibility, it's the case of tables. So what we send the page now, for example, is a table that does have like all of the rows clearly defined. You can see a small line that defines the different rows. But vertically, so there is like a little bit of difference in terms of how the columns are defined. They're mostly there in terms of lines, but like one column is sticking out. Maybe this column in another setup wouldn't be there at all. You know, it's one of these examples that for someone who can see is very easy to identify. For us, like the second that we see that text is all aligned, we know that, okay, these are columns. And then we see that the rows have lines, so that's even easier. But for a machine, that's extremely hard to do. And it's especially hard to do if you want to just program it to do like what we call like more deterministic coding. So that would be really difficult to have in a very like organized and clear fashion. So that's why it's like these are the cases where it's actually better to use machine learning to basically, you know, we just build a model, or it's a collection of models even, I should say. We just fed basically the machine a lot of these tables, told it exactly what a table looked like, and it was able to learn what it means to have a table, and then be able to add all of the necessary tag to that document. Yeah, and again, like I mentioned, there's also a lot of other elements on this page. Like the reading order is one that's also very difficult. It's difficult for a machine to understand that when there are two paragraphs, what's the order in which it should be read. So our tag also does a really good job at you know, identifying these different elements and then adding the tags back to the PDF to make it more accessible. And I guess just to finish at that point, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be like small errors, though it varies a lot. Like for documents like the one we see on the screen right now, this is great for the you know, for our Autotag. It probably gets it all the way to like 99% accessible. Most of the tags would be correct. So it would really reduce the time needed to make it accessible by hand by a lot, because it's just a question of running the Autotag and then doing the quick check to make sure that everything is correct. I guess before I jump to this one, I don't know if I can't see the chat. I don't know if I should pause for a question for a second. If Edward or Katie can
I'm
help me.
covering Hugo, I'm covering questions in the chat.
Even
For
better.
now.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now that I've explained how to add the tags to a document, which, like I said, is one of the biggest part of making a document accessible, there is still a question as, okay, but how do I know which file should be fixed? Because there is more than just tagging to making a PDF file accessible. So this is where we have what we call the accessibility checker. That's available today in Acrobat, very similar to what I just explained for the Autotag. It's been in Acrobat for a long time. But now what we have added is the ability to do it also at scale as an API. So what that means is that we're going to be able to run a lot of different files one after the other by batch. So, and there's a couple of different ways to do that, but basically the idea is that you can have a programmer create a script and run all of the files through the checker all at once, or at least I should say sequentially one after the other. The result of the checker is going to be basically embedded within the PDF that was sent to the checker, or it can be returned as a JSON format on the side, which is much easier if you need to have a script. Basically, if you want to read the output of that checker by another piece of software, the JSON is going to be a great way to do that. So yeah, so now with this, basically with these two tools in hand, I think the checker that makes it a bit easier to understand, okay, what's good or not with the document. Then the auto tag that can really raise the bar and add all of these tags automatically is going to make it just much easier to make PDF files accessible. Now, how can we have what I would call, you know, a more automated and full end-to-end process to do that kind of job? I would say that, you know, there's a lot of different approach, like what Adobe has in terms of solution is very flexible. I'm just going to cover kind of like quickly like three main approaches that are available to clients. The first one is what I would call self-manage. So the idea is that, you know, clients or maybe folks like yourself in the audience, if you have like your own developers in-house that want to automate this whole process, we have APIs that are available to use. What this implies is that you will need to create your own script. You need to integrate the system yourself, and you would also need to be in charge of the manual remediation because, as I mentioned earlier, it's never going to be 100% correct. We cannot make that kind of guarantee, but we can tell it's going to save a lot of time and it's going to really help to make it, you know, easier to tag all of these files and make them accessible. So that's one solution to basically do it completely on your own. Then in the middle, we have what I would say, like what I call like the Adobe Professional Services approach, because Adobe has a team of people who actually help clients on board with that kind of solution. So this means that, this is more for cases where maybe clients have limited in-house resources available. So Adobe can act as a bit of like a consultant in this case and provide additional services. What we don't offer is the manual remediation step, so that would still need to be done in-house or with another third party, which basically brings me to the third case. So another approach is to just go on with like full on white glove service with some, there's like other consulting companies that do that. So in this case, they can really help from, anything from setting up the software, building a custom solution if needed, and even provide the hands needed to do the manual remediation at the end. I listed two examples on the slide here for Perficient and Aftia. These are, well, one is American and the other is a Canadian company. So, but I'm sure that there would be others in Europe that might be available to you. So yeah, so that's just another solution. Like these are folks that we've been partnering with. They can really help to do the full end-to-end approach available to you so that there is like less resources needed in-house. And of course, as you see these approaches on the screen, you slide the little dollar sign just to give a sense that obviously if you go more of like the self-managed route, it's much, much cheaper because it means that just, making API calls and our, Acrobat services are, we're talking about just like pennies every time there is a call being made, while all the way to the consulting firm approach, which will be more expensive because now in this case, it implies, purchasing their services, they are paying them by the number of days that they need to do the job. So I think that's it for these approaches. And actually, I realized I was missing a slide, so I need to talk through something that I realize is not quite listed here. So let me go back to this one, I guess, as part of the self-managed one. One key element that I kind of brush over very quickly is how can we call the Autotag and how can we call the checker? So there basically it's again three different ways to do that. When we took, well, let's talk about the Autotag, and the checker is essentially exactly the same, but so I'll just focus on the Autotag. When someone wants to make a PDF file accessible, they can do it one file at a time. So in this case, they open Acrobat, they can go to the Prepare for Accessibility menu, and actually we're going to see it quickly in the demo. And there is an option there to run the Autotag one file at a time. So that's a way for someone who just has one file to do, and they don't need to automate anything. Then the second way is to automate things, and it can require some programming, a bit like what I explained here, which is why like there's different levels of hand holding that can be done because programming can be quite difficult. But the second approach is somewhere kind of in between. So for folks who have access to Power Automate by Microsoft, it's a way to create an automated solution with just like this low code approach. So it's very simple. I've done it myself. I didn't need to do any complicated coding. So we can just have a folder. So if you're using OneDrive or SharePoint and have access to these Microsoft Power Automate connector, it's super easy to just tell Power Automate that, okay, I have a folder that needs to be monitored. Every time a file gets dropped into that folder, it automatically gets uploaded to Adobe's cloud to be processed, to be Autotag, and then gets downloaded back into another folder. That's something that, again, it's low code. It's just about using some boxes to configure the approach. And then the third one is the full-on API approach. Now, this is a bit more technical, requires like an actual programmer to do the calls. The advantage is that it's also the most flexible one, obviously, because now in this case, someone can decide exactly when to run their script, where, like it can crawl a bunch of different folders. So for folks who have a very big backlog of PDF files that they need to get tagged, it's easy to just create a script and have it like go through all of these different files, maybe run the checker first if we don't know whether the files have been tagged or not, identify the ones that are not tagged at all, for instance, and then run the Autotag on these files. Maybe the ones that have been tagged and passed most of the tests can be left alone and just be remediated manually. So that's the kind of flexibility that the API is allowed. But of course, the downside is that you need an actual programmer to do all of that coding. That's the main ways to call it a tag, and the checker is the same because it's available in Acrobat or it's available as an API, so same thing. Now, I wanted to go quickly. I'm looking at the time. I think I should go very quickly over this one. It's just to show something that we finished ourselves at Adobe very recently. We have what we call Inside Adobe. It's essentially our own internal intranet where all of the 30,000 Adobe employees can go to get information on a lot of useful things regarding life at Adobe essentially. But they had this challenge of having like a lot of different files that needed to be made accessible. Roughly like over 4,000 PDFs that have been put over the years on Inside Adobe. So they needed to make sure that these are made accessible for Adobe employees who may need a screen reader. And they also wanted to ensure that there is a better process moving forward so that when a new file is created and before it gets put on Inside Adobe, they wanted to ensure that it would be made accessible. And of course, the whole point was that they wanted to, minimize the manual work required to do that kind of work. So just to give you a very like high level idea of what the the workflow was. So there was basically like two big categories that I just explained. The initial tagging is what I just described as taking care of the backlog of files, like these 4,000 PDF that existed. And then there is the ongoing part, which is all about making sure that when PDF get created, they get tagged and they get checked automatically. So what that flow here shows, that's where I'm going to spend just a second. And then there's going to be a bit of a walkthrough that show you what the ongoing tagging process looks like. But the idea is that, and of course, because with Adobe, we also use our own experience manager, AEM. So this is just like our way to organize files. This is not something that is essential to use the accessibility auto tag or the checker. This is just a way to store files. But again, it could be like, files can be stored on Google Drive, and then you would just need a programmer to write a script to read the files from this Google Drive. Or it can be on SharePoint, OneDrive. Then that might be a bit easier because there is Power Automate connectors available. Or it can be something like AEM, where we're actually working to improve some of the, make it a little bit easier to use AEM automatically with the Autotag, but we're not quite there yet. So right now, like just see this as basically storage for, any kind of files. The storage doesn't really matter. What really matters more is like the flow. So what we see here, like if we start from the very left, like an asset being uploaded to AEM, right away, we're going to have like that pink box, which is the accessibility checker. Then if the checker passes right away, then we can know that, okay, this gives a good sense that the file is good enough to be published. There might still be, again, like I mentioned before, there might still be some errors. So it's not necessarily the ideal way to publish a file for accessibility purposes, but we know that it meets a certain bar. So it's definitely much better than having no tags at all. It's much better than having like a bunch of tests that fail via the checker. But it's actually going to really raise the bar and make sure that the file is in good shape. And also the key here is that because we're using that internally, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more flexibility in terms of the types of standards that we want to meet for accessibility. Because I know that, for example, it's not like we have to meet a certain standard that is for publicly available documents, because these are to be used internally. So we know that if a user within Adobe uses a file and everything has passed the checker, they're going to get a good experience. It might not meet all of the different standards that exist worldwide, like WCAG 2.1, but it's going to at least give them a good experience. And if they run into some issue because they're an Adobe employee, they can easily reach out to the author of the document or the rest of the team that can then help. So that's the whole idea. It really saves time. It raises the bar. It makes it much easier for them, even though, again, we can't promise that it's going to be like 100% compliant. But anyway, so going back to the flow, the idea is that like we run the checker every time a file is uploaded to AEM. If it fails, then it goes to that next step, which is running the Autotag API. And I believe that they added some tests to make sure that it only does that when tags are not detected, or depending on actually, if no tags is found in the file, it's necessarily good to run the Autotag. Because the Autotag will always start from scratch. It's always going to remove all of the tags and add all of them. So we know that if there are no tags in the document, it's always good to run it. When there are some tags, now it's a little bit trickier because it depends on the specific tests that are failed. So the team develop, assess like which tests really matter. And then when certain tests fail, we just run the auto tag again, because it's going to, again, remove all of the tags and do the job of auto tagging it. Once that is done, we run the checker again to try to understand whether, okay, now that we raised the bar enough, like I was saying, is this good enough now to basically, make it publishable? And then if it does pass, then it gets to the end, which means that it's going to get published on the website. And I think did I miss one step? Oh yeah, of course. If it does fail at this point, then it is sent for manual remediation. So that means in this case where the Autotag did its job, but there were like too many tests that fell. So someone will need to like take a look and do the remediation work manually. All right. And then I just saw something pop on my screen, so I'll close this. And now I think, yeah, I'm spending a lot of time for that. So I'm going to, this is just kind of like the conceptual diagram for the architecture. I'm just to flash it on the screen for just 2 seconds. If anybody's interested, they can maybe go back to recording and take a closer look at that. And similar here for the click-through demo, this is basically just explaining in a bit more detail what I just explained in terms of how the file can go through the process. And I'm going to show you some screens quickly that show what it looks like. So for example, we have a file here that starts with a bunch of errors. So that's something that normally someone would be a bit concerned by, like, oh no, my file has all of these accessibility errors. When they went into the prepare for accessibility menu in Acrobat, they saw that there was like all of these tests that were not passed correctly. But because the solution is automated, they don't need to worry too much yet, because they are just going to upload it anyway within AEM. It's going to be put in the folder where they need their file to be. But now, because of the automation that has been put in place, as soon as the file has been uploaded to AEM, what's going to happen is that the checker will run, and they are going to get this warning that their file hasn't passed all of the tests. So this is what we see showing up on the screen here. See at the top right, it says that the file has failed the review from the checker. So the user didn't need to do anything here. Like what I showed at the very beginning was the manual equivalent, but normally they would not even look at that yet. They would just upload their file into AEM, and then they would get this warning saying that, hey, we've detected issue with your PDF file. You may want to take a look and review them. So then it's going to go into, I guess that's just showing the queue of the file. And then they're also going to get a few more description about what actually happened. This comes directly from the checker API. I mentioned the JSON earlier. So that's an example of a system that's able to consume the output of the accessibility checker, read what the tests are, and put that into this task here. So it just created this task automatically, so that now the user knows that, oh, okay, I have like this, I have like the alt text that I need to add to my images, because it was detected by the checker that the document has some images, but the images don't have alt text. So then the user can just go back to their file, they can identify where it is, download it, and do the same process that they would do, but now the file has already been auto-tagged, has already been checked. So it's going to be much faster for them to do the, what they need to do to just fix it. Because as you can see now, the tag PDF has passed, and we're just going to see that the few errors are related to the alt text for figures that are in this document. So now this part, the user can just like fix their file and re-upload it to AEM. So this is just what we see here. And this time the checks have passed, because now that assuming that the user did the right thing of fixing out the errors, and they can just, now they'll be able to publish it to inside Adobe in our case, given that now it has passed all of the checks. One thing to mention here is that this is, I explained how there is basically the looking backward to try to fix the backlog of files, the full 4,000 files. So this was obviously automated, and it's and it takes a little while to try to find which files need more manual work. So that was quite like a big project to solve all of that. But the fact that everything could be auto-tag has saved like tons and tons and tons of hours. But again, there was still like that manual step of remedying files. And what we just saw now is more of the looking forward, like moving forward. What are the contributors to inside of Adobe going to be going through when they need to make a file accessible? So that's the example that I just showed. That's why it's a little bit more manual in the sense that it's one file at a time. The user will open it and do the fixes one file at a time. But the whole process has been automated. They didn't need to run the check automatically right away. They were actually told that the file had an issue, which is great, because they could have just forgotten, right? Oh wait, I didn't think that my file was not accessible. Let me go fix that. So that's one of the big strengths here, having this automation, be it for high volume use cases for backlog remediation, or even like in this case for one file at a time, but with these automated checks in place, that really makes a big difference to make sure that these PDF files are made accessible. And it just provides a much better experience, again, ultimately to the users who are going to consume these files. Anybody using a screen reader, getting the content out of these files is just going to be getting a much, much better experience. And that's the whole point. And yeah, I guess that just shows where it would show up. And that's kind of like a summary of this project. So we, I think at the beginning I mentioned 4,000 files, but ultimately there was like, because it was like this big batch of files that needed to be processed, they cut it into small chunks. And just to give you a sense, there was a 3,000 file, which would be processed in only 4 hours. Each file could have taken like an hour each. So it's crazy the number of hours that this saved. It obviously brings us like one step closer to compliance, even though, again, we cannot promise that this gives compliance. You always need a human to do that last step. It just like really makes a big difference in terms of time saving. And of course, like the old point of this project is like just to, I keep talking about compliance, but ultimately it's because we care about the user, right? Especially for something like accessibility, people are not always comfortable coming up and saying that, hey, sorry, I can't consume this file for X and X reason. So this is what, Adobe really cares about, that kind of topics. Like we have this notion of Adobe for all. We have a lot of different initiatives that go way, way, way beyond just accessibility. But this project has been like super interesting because it's one that can really make a difference. It can really help people who use a screen reader to feel comfortable and get the content that they need. And basically just making sure that they get the same experience as anybody else who can who's sighted and can actually consume these PDF files. So we hope that's going to make a big difference for our colleagues, and we also hope that more companies, universities, folks like yourself who are watching this right now, we hope that you also be able to make your PDFs more accessible. And I think I will stop here. I see that, you kind of roughly half of the time. I hope that was okay, since I know we have another topic today. So, and Rob mentioned that he was looking at questions in the chat. Is there anything else I should cover right now?
If Rob, there's anything you feel you want to expand upon, I've got to say I've been watching the chat and I feel like my kind of brain is slightly going to meltdown. The amount of activity there. I don't know how Rob's keeping on top of it. We're getting loads and loads of questions. But something else as well is that we can capture, the chat as well. So if there's things that maybe you need more time to explain or want to get back to us about, that's something we can follow up on. But I think
and I
is...
assume that you leave. I know I don't have it on the slide, but you can put our information. Anybody, they can feel free to reach out to Rob or myself if they have more direct questions. And I don't know if when you upload it to YouTube, I don't know if it's in the description, but anyway, I'm sure we can find ways to share that information with all of you.
That would be great. Yeah,
and that's why I'm leaving that slide, because that's where that's kind of like our entry portal for all things API. So that would be always a good starting point.
That's great. Well, we'll let Rob and Alistair deal with it. I think it's very sensible to split up and do the chat and you do the presentation, because it's quite it's hard to do both.
I still don't see it, so I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm keeping up as well in the chat as I would like to. There are a couple of kind of general things I want to touch on.
Sure.
One is one that just came in a bit ago about the question is, it's not really a question, but is there no product that will produce an accessible PDF out of the box? The answer to that is kind of yes and no.
Yeah.
If you do everything right in Word to make a fully accessible Word document, you're using all the styles correctly, you only create what I call a simple table, which may have column headers and row headers. You put alt text on your images. You add your title to the Word document in the file information in Word. If you do all of that, and it is a fairly straightforward document, it will come out pretty darn close, if not 100%, using the Acrobat plugin to Word to convert it to a PDF. We've done a lot of work in the last year to take advantage of every single piece of structural information that we get from Word. The same is true if you're using InDesign. If you know exactly how to create an InDesign file that will convert to a fully tagged, fully accessible PDF. It's a lot harder, from my perspective, in InDesign than it is in Word. But the reality that and part of the reason that we've done these APIs is the reality is twofold. One, there are literally trillions of documents out there today that were never tagged for accessibility that people still have on their websites. We had, as Hugo mentioned, we had 4,000 documents on our internal website. Some were accessible, but many were not. And so having these to kind of catch up helps. And then the other thing is, the reality still is today, people don't do the right thing in the source document. If you had everybody creating 100% accessible Word documents using the checker in Word and all of that, then yeah, we could rely on that, but we can't. And so as Hugo was talking about, what we've done with our project is just kind of use it as a check. So, if a document, a PDF comes in to be posted, we'll run the checker API automatically on it. And if it passes, great, we post it. If it fails, then we can run it through the Autotag API. And if it's a fairly straightforward document, the Autotag API is going to come out to be pretty darn close to 100%. Now, these are internally posted documents. So what we have gone for is usable and not necessarily fully meeting WCAG. And so, your bar will be different depending on how these documents are being used. So yes, would I love to have assurance that everything that comes out of a tool and is converted to a PDF is going to be 100%? Absolutely. But is that the reality today? No. I will say that there's been quite a thread about things like Born Accessible, where we really want to have a tool that will allow users, actually not allow, I'm going to change the word there, and I hesitate to use this, but I'm going to say will force users to do the right thing. So for example, one example of that might be a user is typing up text and they do bold and 24-point font. A tool that is going to help you create a born accessible document might then pop up a message and say, hey, we've noticed that you've used bold 24-point font. Is this a heading? And then we can automatically turn it into a heading. And that's just kind of a simple example. So what we are proposing now internally at Adobe is that Express become that tool. It's a brand new tool, and so it doesn't have legacy problems. And so we're looking at developing this born accessible approach in Express for all types of PDFs, including forms, so that you can easily create a document, convert it to a PDF, and know that you're done. But today, no, if you are a PDF remediator, you have job security for a long time. I don't see that changing anytime immediately.
Rob, this might be, I'm glad you introduced the point about Express there. This is something I did want to talk about as well. So Adobe Express is a new tool which is actually becoming very widespread is being used in a very widespread way now in UK universities, with a lot of institutions now having licenses for all students and staff, for example, and that's going to be expanding a lot over the years to come. So it's going to be a very commonly used tool. To explain what it is, it's a tool that you can edit images, videos, create social media. It has Gen AI built into it, and it has PDF creation and editing built into it as well. So give it a try if you want, Adobe Express. But I did want to. The reason I bring it up here is because we're currently putting a big focus on making that tool as accessible as possible, and we have an engineering team that is working on that and focusing on that at the moment. And actually, one of my colleagues, MJ, is along today. MJ, I don't know, did you want to say a little bit about the work that you guys are doing and how people can help with that?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me. I'm Maryann, and I do go by MJ. I sit on the same team as Rob on the accessibility team at Adobe, and I support Adobe Express. Yeah, so like Alistair mentioned, we have a team that is focused on fixing accessibility issues around the product UI. So that's making sure that the product is usable by people with disabilities. But I think that we could and should do more work around enabling users to create accessible content, such as PDFs. We are looking to support PDF tagging in this third quarter of the year. And we are, there are a number of other accessibility features for authoring that exist today, such as automatically captioning videos. But I think that there's a lot more that we need to do, especially around PDFs, just talking to this audience here. You know, tagging is just one part of PDF accessibility. And I guess how you can help move the needle is by just giving me your feedback on what are the pain points or the gaps around accessibility that you're experiencing in Express, whether that's authoring or from a UI perspective. Any of that feedback would be helpful, just because in my experience so far, Express has been really responsive to customer feedback. They'll respond better to customer feedback than to me, I'll say that. So I can put my contact information in the chat, and feel free to follow up with me if you would like. Or you can share your feedback here if you have any experience with Express already.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if anyone is, you know, if you, for example, are seeing issues come up within your organization, within your institution, where people have used Express, or you know, you've tried it out yourself, you know, we'd definitely love to get your feedback. So, you know, it's a great opportunity to give feedback on you know, some of the points that you know, you might have dealt with, and there probably will be coming up in the future, and to make sure that this tool is as can be. So yeah, it's a great chance.
I'm going to jump back in for a minute. There's been a lot of questions about tables, and I want to, if I can find share, there we go. I'm going to share my screen. Because I want to show something as a PDF remediator, something that folks might find helpful. So here I have a document. Let's see if I can get rid of all the there's too many things going on here. How to hide the toolbar. Sorry, folks. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, So here I have a document. For those of you who are really familiar with Acrobat, you will, and haven't looked at the new version yet, you'll notice that I've got my tag tree over on the right and my tools over on the left. We've done a whole lot of new UI elements. And so if I go to this first table, oops, that's the wrong one. Hang on. I got two screens. Let's try this again. All right, this is the one I wanted. So this was created out of InDesign. And you can see that this first table just didn't get tagged right. However, when I ran the API, it did tag, and it gave me my headings correctly. And so instead of having to go in and manually create that table and all the tags for it, I ended up with a well-tagged table. Even down here, if you go down to this last table row, I've got my data cell, and then my data cell with all of my content in there. So it recognized the way that, I don't know if I was so busy answering questions, I'm not sure if Hugo said this or not, but the way that the API kind of does stuff in tagging, and we used machine learning and AI to come up with this. And it kind of looks at it visually. So when it looks at something like this, it's like, well, this looks like a table. It's got some lines and, you know, structure to it. And so we're going to tag it as a table. One of the other things that I have found really useful, a lot of times people use tables for layout, but there's no structure to it. So there's no lines or things like that. It's laid out using a table. When I use the API, it automatically will tag that not as a table because it doesn't visually look like a table. Same thing with reading order. It understands the white spaces. And so it will get the reading order in a document. If you have a 2-column document, it will understand that this is the first column and this is the second column, and it'll read that way in the reading order because of that white space. Whereas any other tagger that I've used, and certainly the old tagger built into Acrobat, which is still there, will cross that white space and not give you 2 columns. So I really love this API for saving me time in remediating documents that maybe didn't come across well, or in tagging documents that are untagged. And I'm going to show you, I'm in the new one, but I'm going to show you, if you go to preferences, whether in the new or old version, and you go to accessibility, down at the bottom, where is it? Well, that's interesting. Under other accessibility options, there should be a button that says use cloud-based tagging. I'm not sure why that is not showing up on my screen here. That's very interesting. Also, the first time you use the newer version, a message will come up that will ask you if you want to turn on the cloud-based tagging. Start PDF here and see if I've done something weird.
I've definitely got that, Rob, just to confirm. I just looked in Acrobat and I've definitely got that. Maybe you've installed the beta or something.
Yeah. Who knows what's going on there? All right. I'm in the old version. Go to edit, preferences. There it is. Enable cloud-based auto tagging for accessibility. So you'll want to turn that on to be able to play with the API in Acrobat itself. And again, where I find the value of this is in actually in remediation. You know, if I'm doing a one-off, you know, I've got one document I'm remediating and the tags are just horrendous, I'll run it through the Autotag API and it will frequently clean it up for me. And so it's easier for me then to remediate it and will save me a lot of time. The other power, as Hugo's already talked about with the API, is bulk. Being able to do stuff in bulk and create a workflow where you are always checking your documents and running them through the API if necessary. And then, you know, as Hugo said, in the process that we're using, we check it, we auto tag it if it's not correct, and we check it again. And then if it still fails, then it goes back for manual remediation. But it just saves us a whole lot of time in processing documents on a regular basis. All right, now let's see if I can figure out how to stop sharing. Am I still there or did I close my thing? There it is.
We see your Slack actually.
Yeah, you don't want to see my Slack. I can't figure out how to get back to since I collapsed everything. Don't see Zoom. All right, well, I figured that out. If anybody has other questions, oh, thank you, Edward. I'm assuming you did that for me.
Might have been Kelly, wasn't me.
Helping out.
Other questions that we missed in the chat?
Actually, Rob and Hugo and Alistair as well. We've had, you know, some people picked up on. I mean, that was helpful that you gave us a bit of an overview there. If people wanted to have more of a deep dive into the actual like how-to functionality, and also have the opportunity to try some products out before committing to them, is there a way to do that? Do you have a process for enabling people to evaluate or to pilot products?
Yeah, I think all of them have like some kind of trial. No, I know for APIs it's the case. There is what we call a free tier. It's actually not just a trial because it's free forever. It's just that it's a very small number of transactions. And if needed, you know, if someone needs more transactions to do a larger test, we're always happy to give more free transactions. It's just our way to control it a bit, you know, just to prevent abuse of our free tier essentially. But especially for EDU, since, you know, I think that's the context of most people who are here, right? Like we're, you know, Adobe really cares about that, and we know that it's the right thing to do, as we keep saying. So yeah, and that's for APIs. I don't, Rob, if I'm not even quite sure how Acrobat itself works in terms of trials. You know, if there is like because I know that was one of the questions actually, to use the auto tag in Acrobat. It only works with the paid versions of Acrobat. It doesn't work with the free version. I don't know if there's a way to just
if you like, Hugo. I mean, most of the UK institutions will have access via the JISC agreement. I mean, I know not every single institution is part of that agreement, but if you are, then all staff for most of them are covered with Creative Cloud All Apps, which includes Acrobat Pro, so they do have access to that. And there's obviously, if you find that, you know, you don't have that at your institution, then there is a 7-day free trial of Acrobat Pro, which you can sign up for with like an individual ID, but almost all of you will have access to Acrobat Pro, or if you don't, I would speak to your IT services and just make sure that they're assigning you the right license, because they probably do have some licenses available.
Yeah, makes sense. And I just realized also, I'll put it in the chat. And for folks who are, especially folks who are seeing the recording, I don't think they get the chat right, but they will see the link on the screen for Acrobat Services API. So if they go to the accessibility section, there is a try the demo button. It's basically a web UI where files can be tested one by one. So I saw there was a question about that too at the same time. So that's another way to test it out. This one has a limit of, I believe it's 5 or 10 files per day that can be uploaded using that tool. So this one is not even, I don't know, dependent on Acrobat. Files can be just uploaded one by one on the web, and then you get the tag version right away.
Somebody just mentioned that they just tried to auto tag a document and got an error that it was unable to tag it. And there are a lot of reasons for that. You know, this is a cloud-based tagging. So if you were not able to go out to the cloud because of your organization's restrictions, then it would not be able to tag it. If it was a scanned document, it's not going to tag it using the Acrobat implementation of that. If it's a form with form fields in it, it's not going to tag it. If it's too long, if it's more than 100 pages, it won't tag it. So there are a lot of documents that aren't going to be able to be tagged. But in general, I should say that the other way. There aren't a lot that aren't going to be able to be tagged, but you are going to find some that are not taggable. And I think that Hugo shared the link out to the Dev Center, and there's some more details there about some of the restrictions on tagging. And I guess I'll just add, I mean, you know, it's not perfect. You know, there is nothing in PDF land that is perfect today. But I have found that it has saved me literally hours and hours and hours of time in dealing with documents, and it's saving our company a lot of time on being able to get documents up to a usable state, certainly for internal posting, without having to go through all of the remediation.
Some colleagues at jisc did a, I think it's pre-release evaluation of the Autotag API, and the feedback from those colleagues who were working in kind of things, document production, was that they estimated it was saving them around about a third of time on working on documents and stuff. There was still, as you've acknowledged, there was still a need to do manual things, but it kind of took some of the load off, and they did say it saved them time. So as you guys are saying as well, it doesn't do it all, but it takes a bit of the load, a bit of the pain out of it. And again, this isn't something I do, so I can't attest this, but a colleague, Andrew, who implemented it, said that he found it easy to, I think he used Python to implement it, and he said it was very straightforward. So that's, you know, just our kind of completely impartial experience with it. Oh gosh, we've only got 2 minutes left. So we better start wrapping things up. Well, I mean, I've got to thank you all our colleagues from our friends from Adobe here today, who've, I realize, I feel like it covered, it's a very complex process and area of technology to cover in just an hour. So I feel what we've done here today is you've answered a lot of questions and given us a bit of an overview, but there will be, especially people who are working with PDFs all the time, you know, will want to do deeper dives, and you've provided your details to enable people to contact you directly. And we will go through the chat as well and have a look and share it with you, if that's okay with the community as well, as a way of encapsulating what the big questions are for our members. And again, through our community, their mailing lists and Teams space as well, we can continue the conversation around this as well. So with just 1 minute to go, and I've thanked you all, that we don't often have a clinic in July, but we are this year. We're doing a summer special mashup with the AI communities for further and higher education. And that will be on the first Wednesday of July, back to the usual lunchtime slot of 12:30. And we'll be pulling together a lot on the subject that just won't die, which is generative AI in and as assistive technology. So we expect that to be a big bumper, and I think it's a really nice summer thing to do to bring communities together. So we'll have a lot of guests in. But thank you so much for all your rigorous questions today. And I think this is just a kind of kickoff, and this is a conversation that we'll keep running. So thank you again to our guests and to all the community people who turned up today. And if you want to revisit any of the detail, we will be posting the video as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you all very much for inviting us. This has been great.
Yeah, and the number of questions is really great to see. So appreciate it.